My name is PearlescentMoon and welcome back to week 6 of my Minecraft A Build a Day challenge. For anyone new to this challenge, the basic idea is that I create at least one build per day for a full 365 or 366 day duration. The month of February became very busy for me while working on a much larger project, so for week 6 I decided to spend it on a village transformation. Each day, I transformed 1 or 2 buildings from the generative vanilla set, then compiled them all into one big town at the end. With all that said and done, let's get into the process. Throughout the week, I of course had to keep everything in the same style for the village to match at the end. So a lot of these processes will be the same and given a blanket explanation that can be carried to each day. With that said, please keep in mind the visual may not completely sync with my explanation at the specific moments. The design theme for this transformation is also based on the castle build from last week. I think it had a nice aesthetic to it, which I would like to carry over in this video. While building in my chosen theme, I started by laying out the foundations. This included using my typical blocks like lapis and iron to kind of mark out where I would like to extend the building. The typical shapes of vanilla homes are somewhat fairly basic, staying to a rectangular and square style. So I wish to change that by adding some height and depth to the structural form itself. This was essentially the first step I took for every day this week in order to transform the village in a similar style. Once I had an interesting looking shape, I occasionally added back the vanilla characteristics to it for an overall form test, which I then once again changed to the intended theme that I wanted to make for this particular village. In order to keep some of the Mojang style present, the A-frame roof format carried over to my new transformation, in which this was further outlined with spruce to give it a nice border around the roof, and then turned into red nether brick to have a nice contrast. Even though I kept the A-frame roof, I added a nice little flick off the end with some spruce slabs just to make the shape a little bit different and fantasy-like. The builds also needed some detail depth, so I added some balconies on the blandest portions of the buildings to help add a little bit of interest to the shapes, so the walls weren't just straight up and down. Of course, I had to use my lovely lectern detailing for the railings, as the gaps between each block placed is just absolutely perfect. In contrast to connecting walls or fences that would otherwise be too thick or too thin. For the walls of each house, I went with a nice brown trim of stripped dark oak or spruce wood, which I then contrasted with a lovely sandstone behind it. Because birch planks are a nice sandy colour like sandstone block, you're able to use it to add some texture to the walls to break up the large amount of sandstone you would otherwise have. You can see me using this along the bottom and top segments of the walls, and also in the stairs and balconies. Oak planks can also assist in breaking up all the colours if it's used in balconies and flooring. Within the first builds, I had originally gone for a square type of tower to match the base geometry of the structure. However, I felt like adding a little bit of that castle format to the house itself. Due to this, I changed some towers to a cylindrical shape where I feel like overall it just helped make the structure feel more interesting to look at, while creating some extra height at the same time. It really depends on the style that you're going for, but mixing up shapes is an effective way to make the build more dynamic. Or fun, as you could also say. Because the towers are cylindrical, their roofs also had to be different. This took inspiration from the castle build from last week again, and we went for a wizard hat shape. I think you can add some cool contrast with shapes as much as you can add contrast with textures and blocks themselves. If you have the same shapes repeated over and over, every portion starts to look the same. Breaking it up with a new shape helps the mind identify placement and location within a village. For the church-type building in the transformation, I turned that into a castle-like pillar tower with an attached home at the bottom for some living space. I do like how I was able to still keep that L shape and adapted it to the new design. I feel like it was somewhat important to keep the original silhouette of at least some of the vanilla houses to show the attribution of the beginnings of such a village. When I moved onto the blacksmith vanilla building, I really wanted to adapt it to the very recognisable cobblestone portion of the house, and carried it forth into my redesign. The stone was still a fairly prominent feature in the new version, where I simply just changed some of the block choices and added some extra detail to make it pop a bit more. Of course, I also added extra height to the building so it wouldn't get lost amongst the other pieces. Campfires are probably one of the best blocks to use to make a build come alive. Creating a living, breathing chimney with smoke appearing out the top allows the village to feel lived in. To create a separation from the structure itself, I decided to make the chimneys a mix out of granite and hardened clay. Both have a red tinge in them, where the granite adds texture to the hardened clay. As the village is an older, fantasy feel, adding in that texture allows it to feel well used and imperfect in the craft at the time. Small details like the spikes on top of most of the roof pieces help give it a little bit of an elegant medieval feel to it, which I oddly like toying with in quite a few of my builds. This effect was created by placing cauldrons with trapdoors surrounding it at the bottom, then placing an anvil, red nether brick wall, nether brick fence, and then some iron bars on top. You can do this with all the different wood and stone wall variants alongside the fences, while always ending with the iron bars on top as the thinnest piece. Most of the transformed homes were given a cute garden, outlined with lecterns as fencing. I really love to add a bit of greenery into my builds, where the rosebush added a nice, vibrant red pop amongst the green to go with the overall roof theme of the village. Looking back at my replay, I feel like I could almost make a Rapunzel type of tower in the same style and similar block choice. Maybe I should do that one day. Would you guys like to see that? I think it could be a bit of fun. The second last day of week 6 ended up falling onto asset creation. On top of a small house being transformed on a general level, I took the vanilla generated market stalls and adapted my chosen palette alongside the well and lamps. Every village needs lighting sources. I don't think we want zombies knocking on our doors each night. With those pieces created, we also needed some small, simple custom trees to plop in the village here and there. I felt like some little spruce type trees would work well in this scenario. And you may also notice I've given the trees a slight gradient. This is created by layering spruce leaves on the bottom, followed by birch, jungle, and then oak. Creating a subtle shading effect pulls it away from the flat nature of one block type, with an added hint of style. With all those bulk structures and small assets complete, we can now move on to the full village transformation. Originally, when I picked which structures to change, I grabbed different pieces from randomly generated villages in my creative flat world. So for this one, I picked one of the first villages I had come across in vanilla terrain. This is where I replaced all the buildings that I'd made transformations for, as well as place in the outlier structures to fill out the space a bit more and make it a full village. As the area is also fairly flat from a perspective front, I decided to add the castle from week 5 into the picture, so there was a point of hierarchy within the composition. This also gave the village homes slightly more context for their well-established style. One thing I did find is a couple of extra houses that I hadn't originally transformed, so I changed up their palette and some small details for them all to match together. I did end up deciding to go for stone on the paths, as the village felt a little bit more established, like a developing city of some sort, where dirt just felt a little bit rough for how much effort the architects or builders would have gone into to create the structures at the time. However, I did add dirt patches here and there to make it look like the ground was a bit more trodden for common walking shortcuts. I think this is a small but effective way to make an area look slightly more lived in. Farms were placed around alongside small details like fences, the lampposts we made earlier, and some extra gardens or rocks. I wanted to fill up the zone with plenty to look at. Given an improvement I could have done is probably experimented more with varying the layout height of this transformation. In the end, it came out slightly flat, but I think it was cool to experiment at least with the original spawn of the vanilla village. With all that said, the transformation is now complete. The homes still retain most of their vanilla interiors, and the village feels quite a bit more full. There are always improvements that could be made here, but for the most part it was a fun challenge to undertake. I hope the video with the commentary wasn't too confusing to watch with the blanket explanation, but I honestly did not know how I was going to edit this video looking back at it originally. When you do the same build style and techniques for 6 out of the 7 days, it gets pretty hard to explain one thing at a time. Normally I'm able to explain the separate process for each one, but I would have just been repeating myself. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching this video. I know it took a long time to come out, and I do have up to 12.5 weeks worth of build a day in total to deliver to you all currently, but they're definitely coming out soon. With so much going on, unfortunately I did have to take a break from posts, but I was still building a little something each day. Your support watching my videos is tremendous, and I can't thank you all enough, honestly. If you have any feedback, please feel free to let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you all again soon with week 7. Much love to you all, and bye guys.